back once again to the Necro Zoo. I am Bones. And in this one, let's go ahead and add one more figure to my McFarlane DC Multiverse collection. Now, today we'll be taking a look at Simon Boz, the Green Lantern. Now, initially, I was really stoked when we heard that McFarlane was going to give us his take on this character. I always enjoyed the character, plus the design and a little bit of his backstory. So I was really interested to see what the figure would look like. And now, gotta be honest with you, once I saw the promo pictures, was kind of let down a little bit. I kind of would have preferred him with a textured costume, which would mean more like Sinestro or the way they're doing the Green Lantern Corps figures. But once again, as I always say, never make a judgment, never decide until you get the figure in hand. That way you could really decide for yourself. So I did order three of these from Best Buy. Luckily, I did get the platinum as one of those three figures, but don't really need to open that one up right now. We'll just focus on the standard release. Now, he does look pretty reluctant in the packaging, but let's go ahead and take a closer look at him. But first, he does come with the collector's edition black DC Multiverse stand. Only difference being it has a silver DC logo printed on there. Now, these are not really needed, but sometimes they do come in useful. He also comes with his data file card. On the front, you have a pretty nice image from the comics of Simon Boz. As I said before, two things that I always enjoyed about him were his costume, which is something that really sets him apart from the other Green Lanterns, and of course his decision to hold on to his firearm. It has to do with in his backstory how he doesn't really like authority or trust any governments or stuff like that. So to him, the Lantern Corps is really just a big space police. So he doesn't fully trust them. I think later on they ruined it because he decides that he doesn't need a firearm. He's a hero, a lantern. So he decides to get rid of the firearm and just use his abilities and strengths as a Green Lantern. On the back, you do have some information on him. Pretty interesting. He is like Lebanese, I think, and that's something that sets him apart that I really enjoyed because I like what I like. Race has nothing to do with it, color has nothing to do with it. That's not how I live my life. He does come with some accessories. He comes with two alternate faceplates. Now, I do have the angry faceplate on him right now, but he also came with just your regular standard look and your SEG grin, which is really disturbing. We'll take a look at each one later on, see how it looks on him. But pretty nice, McFarlane. Really stepping it up with the faceplates at first. Wasn't a big fan of it, but when it works with the figure, it really brings out a cool way to have different emotions, different options without having to have alternate heads. Now, he does come with some constructs, a big power glove fist of a construct. He has a drill connected onto some fist apparatus. Pretty sweet. A hammer, which pretty nice, but not really digging the hammer. I would have really traded the hammer for an alternate fist or at least two alternate hands to match the ones that he comes with. But this is what was released, so we have to live with it. And of course, his personalized Green Lantern energy battery. Now, this is very different from any of the ones we've received before. Once again, they do not get the concept that this is not a construct. This is supposed to be a physical unit that charges their rings. But it's cool. I mean, no biggie. It kind of matches. It gives you a little bit more of a toy factor. Like if kids see this, they're like, oh, they're all little cool constructs that he could have. But for collectors, which really this is more of a market for, it's kind of gets a little bit irritating. Now that is it for accessories. Let's go ahead and take a closer, more detailed look at the figure. Now, of course, this is based on the Blue Beetle Booster Gold original body book, which is one of the reasons why I kind of was disheartened a little bit when I saw the final images of what he was going to look like. Really, like I said before, really would have preferred him to have more textured, more sculpted out elements to his costume. We'll take a look later on at the DC Direct and you'll see what I'm talking about. But getting past the initial sorrow, in hand, he does work really well. That's another thing you have to understand is the way McFarlane gave us the Silver Age Hal Jordan, which is, plain with no texture. He gave us that original Hal Jordan that was over textured, really out there with the design. And in the future, he may give us one that uses that Green Lantern core body that just has that uniformed texture and design that all the lanterns have been using. So once you get past that, accept it for what it is because in the comics they do have different costumes for Simon Boz. Sometimes it's really sculpted out and designed like a more uniform, and sometimes it's just your plain traditional Green Lantern suit, which doesn't have a lot of additional sculpt or texture details or stuff like that. So once you get past that, it is a pretty nice looking figure. They did pick a nice body book that matches Simon Boz's size and shape. But for first impressions, really surprised that I did tend to enjoy this. Now, the green on him goes back to the comics where he has more of like a glow in the dark tinge, like almost a yellowish tinge to his powers and effects. And they did capture that here in his costume. Take a look at the head sculpt. Once again, this is the angry faceplate, so he does look a little bit teed off. But once again, we see that when the faceplates are on a masked figure, they tend to work exceptionally well. Love the design of Simon Bow's mask. As I said before, that's one of the things that attracted me to him was the way he wore a mask, where a lot of lanterns only wear that domino mask, and he chose to wear like a whole covering mask. I always thought was pretty sweet. And I do have to say that the paint and the cleanliness of the lines and everything is really spot on by McFarlane. In the recent releases, you haven't really seen a lot of people complaining about, you know, paint being off or splattered paint. They really seem to be tightening up their process, and a lot of the figures are coming out really sharp and accurate. So, in all actuality, they did capture the look of Simon Boz with the head sculpt. Let's take a look at the articulation. Looks down, pretty good. Looks up really well. You don't even need to mod it, and he looks up almost all the way. You got right to left. And of course, you could tilt his head for some attitude. Pretty sweet. Take a look at that costume I was talking about. You got the lantern emblem design, but encased in that off yellow green that Simon Boz is known for. And all the design lines match right up that way. If you lean them back, you can see the bottom of the design lines, but if you put them straight, at least all of the lines match up perfectly on the figure. Take a look at the articulation. You got side to side at the waist, full tilt-a-whirl, lower waist swivel, upper chest swivel. You could twist him, get him in some action poses. He does have a semblance of a crunch, not much. You can mod these to get a little bit more, but for Simon Boz, it doesn't bother me. That's enough crunch. Take a look at the shoulder. You got that socket and bushing shoulder joint, which gives you a lot of range and movement. Bicep swivel, double jointed elbows, looks pretty clean, pretty nice. Straighten them out. Down into the wrist, you got the four ways of articulation from McFarlane, as well as a gun gripping hand, as if they knew that this character could come with a gun. It's up in the air because now in the comics he doesn't really use the firearm anymore. But for traditional collectors, they're gonna want him with a firearm. On the other side, you got a fist with the ring, as well as his Arabic tattoo. I think it means courage, and it glows a lot of times in the comics, which is a nice little detail, giving it some luminescence. Awesome, awesome so far. T pose really easily and smoothly. And let's go down and look at the thighs. Now, he does have some nice thigh swivel, a lot of movement there, so you don't need a thigh cut to move the boot from side to side. He could kick up, really nice. Kick back really far as well. Now, I'm not a fan of the way the trunks are cut, the way they have that extra flap hanging over the butt. So I have been getting better and better at doing this. So I'm gonna cut it and trim it and tighten it up and show it to you guys later on in the video. Double jointed knees, straighten them out up and down at the ankle, right to left, rocker, and of course toe. Elation, not too much to talk about in the lower body because it's just a plain suit. Take a look at him from the bottom. No tread, but he does have some identifying marks. Moving up the back, once again, just a smooth body. Not even a belt to break up, the top and bottom of the figure, but it's fine. And into the back. At least they did add some nice detail on the back of the costume. And even in the back of the head, the lines for his costume go all the way down. Pretty much a thorough costume design. So, all in all, very surprised at how much I'm enjoying this guy. I had to go through, doing the figure photography and customizing some stuff that I didn't like. And the more I worked on him, the more I posed him, really starting to grow on me. In fact, I put off some other projects I was working on because I was having too much fun with this Simon Boz. Now, of course, you could use the constructs to take photos with him. They work really well. You could change the face plates. You could have him smiling. You could have him just neutral, or you could have him angry, really giving you different options. But I did do a little bit of customizing, of course. First off, I did trim the trunks in the back. So when you look at it, now you could see how cleaner it looks and it doesn't have that excess material leaning over the side and making it look too wide. And even if you articulate him, it still works. Real smooth and clean lines, and it keeps its aesthetics. Now, before I forget, I did go, when I saw all these constructs and then I thought about the ones we have gotten for the Green Lantern Corps, I thought, oh, maybe we can mix and match. But then I realized that he's not a regular lantern. He wears kind of like weightlifting gloves, like cut off finger gloves. He doesn't have white gloves, so I had to think what I wanted to do to make him give him a little bit of spice. And what I ended up doing was I took one of these, and since I have like 6 of these, the Lantern Blast from the Green Lantern Corps, but of course, it has a white glove, and I repainted it really quickly, adding some black where the glove would be, and then repainting the skin tone of the hand to match his skin tone. Now, this wasn't as difficult as it would seem because we kind of have a very similar skin tone. His is probably like Egyptian cinnamon, and mine is more like honey caramel. So it wasn't far fetched for me to be able to match the skin tone on the fingers. Now, once I let it dry, I was able to adapt it to his wrist joint, and it looks really nice. Worked really well. That's why I said once I started adding my own features, really started falling in love with this figure, making him one of my favorites to finish off the year from McFarlane. Now, of course, you know me, I had to go ahead and add his holster so he could hold his firearm. Now, had to decide first which firearm. Now, that makes me go ahead and bring out the DC Direct version of Simon Boz. Love this figure. I even have one still in box. Beautifully sculpted, beautiful paint. They had the holster with the gun. The only negative about this figure is, of course, his scale and the 7 points of articulation. So he's not going to be doing any posing. Like this McFarlane one can get you some awesome poses. And this DC Direct one is basically a statue. One detail I loved about this DC Direct Simon Boz was the boots. He has like kind of like kick pads for wrestling, which I always thought were cool. Some tread on the boots, which you know I'm a big fan of. But what I did do is try and take some things from the way his holster and gun are and put it into this McFarlane figure. Now, I picked a gun that really was a match for the one on the DC Direct, Desert Eagle style firearm, but in a gunmetal gray. Pretty sweet. And then I had to make the holster, had to cut and modify to get it to fit the way I wanted. The shape of the leg is a big factor. The ability to make this holster functional is another factor I always have to think of. But I was able to accomplish it where you can put it in the holster and pull it back out with a good amount of ease. Last thing I wanted to add was like the strap that goes around the leg to hold the holster. I didn't want the holster just sitting on there. I wanted it to look like it was really strapped on to his leg. So I did that, painted it up. Works really well. The way I glued it onto the leg, you have to remember that I have to do it to be able to still cock out his leg where he could still do the splits, even though he has his holster and his weapon. You could just see the smile coming onto Simon Boz's face once he had his gun. Beautiful poses, awesome poses. Really give him that cool factor that I always liked about the character. Change out the face plates. The fun was really extraordinary. So, although I'll always cherish this DC Direct version of Simon Boz, I have to move on and adapt to new articulation. Although some details, like the sculpt work on the costume, were negatives for me. Big thing he was missing was alternate hands, so that's a negative. But it is a pretty top figure. Not sad that I bought him at all. I'm really having a lot of fun with him. And really, really a cool figure to add to my collection. So, anyways, guys, as always, enjoy your figures, enjoy yourself, keep hunting out there, keep customizing, and I will see you on the next one.
They used to call me Crazy Joe, but now they can call me Fat Man.